Welcome back. Today, with the help of Renita-chan, we're going to be looking at an article from Everyday Feminism. Yes, I'm very much aware they should have shut down by now. Turns out they haven't yet. So I figured we'd get in before they do. The article is titled 9 Phrases Allies Can Say When Called Out Instead of Getting Defensive. So let's dive right in.
Real talk. No one likes being called out. It's difficult to grapple with the idea that we may have gotten it wrong, that despite our best intentions, we've done real harm.
Okay, so 2 quick things before we continue. Firstly, Renita is reading directly from the article. This is not a response video to her, she is just reading for me. If you want to read it as she reads it, which is weird, I will leave a link to the article in the description, right next to her channel. Second, as I make response videos, I don't see a problem with calling people out or being called out when I am wrong, which is the whole point of calling someone out when you believe they are wrong. The really important part is whether or not you're right, or have the facts to back it up.
And I know from personal experience that our gut reaction isn't always effective. I often can't help but feel a surge of defensiveness because sitting with my mistakes can be a really uncomfortable experience. What I've learned along the way, however, is that discomfort can be a good thing.
All of which I can agree with. However, context is important. Different circumstances get different reactions. You cannot equate the two if they are very different.
All the best opportunities for growth and reflection involve some level of discomfort.
If that is true, then you are doing it wrong.
Being called out or in can be a gift, as it calls on us to rise up and do better, to tap into our empathy and do the serious and critical work of interrogating our own beliefs and biases. This is how we align our values with our actions.
Which isn't entirely true. Some people live in what we call echo chambers. Those people hide behind blocks. They will outright state that no one else is right, only what they think is right. Everything else is heresy.
Responding to a call-out involves slowing down. It requires decentering our own feelings and tuning in, which takes a certain amount of practice and skill.
Or you just do what I did and forget it even happened for about 3 months, and then address it because it was so damn important you waited 3 months.
This can be difficult to do when we're feeling fragile and vulnerable.
Or forgetful.
When I first started writing publicly, I had no idea how to navigate those feelings, but I've been fortunate enough to have the chance to flex these muscles and learn as I go along.
While I have spent a fair amount of time with what we've gone through so far mocking it, there is some validity to the points being made. For example, that nervousness and making it up as you go along or learning on a job I can certainly relate to with regards to YouTube.
One question I get often, especially from folks who already struggle with anxiety and dealing with conflict, is how to first respond without doing further damage. When our emotions put up a wall in front of us, it can feel like we're cornered or trapped and we become reactive instead of thoughtful.
Now this particular segment is actually rather interesting, and I think I may make a separate video on it in the near future. Because while your article has 9 separate points, not one of them truly answers this little bit itself, or is helpful enough in a way that I believe could in fact assist those that struggle with anxiety.
We can wind up rambling, making excuses, denying the impact, and even gaslighting, all in a frantic attempt to de-escalate the situation. And unfortunately, we end up perpetuating the harm that prompted the call-out in the first place. I actually think the best responses are deceptively simple. Don't know what I mean? I've compiled a list that I've picked up as both the one having been called out and the one doing the call-out that can facilitate healing. While this is by no means an exhaustive list, it's a place to start, and oftentimes getting started is the most difficult part. The next time you're called on to do better, take a deep breath, or better yet, a lot of deep breaths, and consider the following responses.
Okay, so we've successfully traversed the anecdote at the start. Yay. Now we're going to get on to these damn points. I'm going to let it play from the point being made and the explanation to the point, and then we will dissect them each in turn.
Number 1. I recognize that I have work to do. Your first instinct might be to say something like, I didn't mean to. This is a super common gut reaction, and you're not alone there. But while it may be true that you didn't purposefully harm anyone, you aren't actually acknowledging the harm that you've caused when you become defensive. You can express the exact same sentiment while still acknowledging that you messed up by simply saying, Wow, you're right, I need to work on this. I have work to do is a great response on many levels. It validates the concerns that have been raised, and it also affirms that the responsibility to fix this situation rests with you and not the marginalized folks who have called you out. It's a way of saying, I really didn't mean to, and you're absolutely right, at the same time, which allows you to express your intention, but most importantly, still own the impact that your actions have on others.
If you take the time to remove race from the entire equation altogether, all this boils down to needs improvement. Must work harder. It sounds like something you'd get on a school report card, which in itself is quite condescending. People get defensive because they've been called out for saying something because somebody else has taken it to mean something more racially insensitive. That's offense taken. That doesn't mean that the person is being racist. It means that person's offended. And quite a lot of people get defensive when they're accused of being racist because we're being led to believe that being accused of being racist is an end-all. It's a stigma, one that could cost people their jobs or lose them friends and family. Then again, if it's on the internet, honestly, everyone's been called racist at least once.
Number 2, I'm going to take some time to reflect on this. Sometimes in the moments after a call-out, we aren't ready to respond. This is especially true of folks who already struggle with conflict and anxiety and in the immediate moment are perhaps too emotional or even fragile to engage. Trust me, I've been there many times. Call-out culture hasn't always been kind to neurodiverse folks for whom these moments can be especially difficult to navigate. It's absolutely okay to step back until you're ready to tune in to what folks are saying. Take the space you need to reflect, research, re-examine, and breathe. Let folks know that you're engaged and that you're going to take a minute to think about what's been said. I'm listening and I really appreciate what's been said so far. You might reply, I'm going to take some time to reflect before I respond. As long as you're actually committed to circling back around, don't make promises you don't intend to keep. This is always a better choice than getting swallowed up in a conflict that you aren't prepared to handle.
In the context of this article being about allies and race and intersectional feminism, I want to go on a slight tangent, because there are points made within this part that can be very simply answered. For example, when you are accused of being racist, you immediately stop and panic. It's normal. It's a completely normal reaction because someone has said something, they've accused you of something that is socially quite terrible. So we have to take the time to quickly think whether or not we have. We speed reflect. Let's go with that. And then we respond, typically with no, and either they double down, or you explain yourself, or they talk over you while you try to explain yourself, and it devolves into some kind of pointless fight. The responses provided, yes, while true, and certainly things most people would do, operate under the assumption that the other person who has accused you of something would give you the space needed for you to reflect, which isn't always going to be the case if you're being accused of being racially insensitive or racist towards your ally.
Number 3. I appreciate the labor you've put in. Callouts involve a lot of emotional labor.
Depends entirely on the circumstance.
Whenever I've contacted someone and asked them to recognize harm, I often have to open my own wounds wide open and take on the role of an educator as I try to explain where they went wrong.
Only applicable in the context of being an educator, not applicable to calling out. When you are educating somebody, you are not calling them out when you are correcting them. You are correcting them because that is your job.
I by no means delight in doing this.
Bullshit.
I put in the time and effort, though, because I believe that this person can do better. It hurts when someone takes that labor for granted. It hurts when they ignore the fact that I've invested in them, and they instead ignore me, block me, gaslight me, or insult me. Even if they don't initially agree with my assessment of the situation, it wouldn't hurt to acknowledge the effort I've put in to help them understand, and the ways in which I made myself vulnerable.
You can only take someone so far before they give up on you or you give up on them. You are an educator and are paid to do this. They are not paid to be there, and they are free to choose whether they wish to learn from you or not.
When a marginalized person takes the time to teach you something, it's essential to recognize their labor.
Just because they put effort into something does not mean they are correct. And I'm not going to then tell them, I'm so happy that you've come to me with this, and I'm very grateful for the amount of effort you've put in to make this, but you're wrong.
Name it explicitly, yes, even if in the moment you still don't understand, didn't ask for it, or are struggling with your emotions about it. This labor was done for you because someone believed in your ability to do better. If nothing else, take a moment to appreciate the effort that was made.
I would consider it highly unlikely that someone's doing it out of love or their desire to educate me, but instead some desire to boss me about and act like a complete condescending twat.
Number 4. I apologize. I'm going to do better. This video on how to apologize by Francesca Ramsey is required for anyone and everyone who aspires to be a decent person, but especially if you're an ally to marginalized people.
I have a black friend. Does this make me an ally?
Apologizing isn't just about saying, I'm sorry. It's a skill that takes a lot of practice and reflection. Knowing how to apologize thoughtfully and authentically is a key part of being an ally.
So one is not allowed to use the preferred language style of that marginalized person, or the stereotypical language styles of that marginalized person.
Apologizing is an essential part of responding to callouts, but it should always be accompanied by a commitment to doing better. Just saying I'm sorry isn't enough. You need to also express your investment in the community that has called on you. Let them know that you're not only sorry for the harm you caused, but that you'll learn from this experience and change your behavior, because real talk, an apology is useless if you don't intend to make a change.
Well, one should look as virtuous as possible when apologizing, shouldn't they? I suppose we should all be posting our apologies and explanations of why we have to apologize and what we're going to do to improve upon ourselves so we don't have to apologize again on every social media platform known to man.
Number 5. How can I make this right?
Do you remember those white people who wore those shirts that said sorry and were chained and tied to wood in a line, begging for mercy and apologizing to black people in Africa because somehow they felt white guilt? Yeah, that's probably what they should do, or just be chemically castrated, because that seems to be where we're going. I mean, white people are so bad anyway, we may as well just get rid of the race to begin with.
For the record, no one calling you out is required to educate you further or assist you in creating a plan of action. It's your responsibility, first and foremost, to make things right. However, in some cases, it doesn't hurt to ask what you can do moving forward and see if actions can be taken to address the harm that was caused. I want to make this right, you might say. If you have the energy or time, please let me know if there's something I can do. Pairing this with a sincere apology and a recognition of the labor that was already done on your behalf definitely doesn't hurt. It's important to remember too, if you aren't actually willing to take action, don't ask people to make suggestions that you won't follow up on. Make sure you mean it before you solicit advice. You'd be surprised by how many folks are all talk.
This entire module can be simply boiled down to the white person must be more proactive and feel more guilt and be better at apologizing and knowing how to apologize for what they don't know they're apologizing for, so they must find out what they've got to apologize for. So if they ask what they're apologizing for, don't expect to be told what they're apologizing for. But if they do get help, yay! Damn white people.
Number 6. What I'm gathering is, insert what you've learned.
Just before you tell me what you think I should have learned, I'm going to tell you what I've learned so far. I now know why everyday feminism is tanking.
You can say sorry until you're blue in the face, but if you don't really know what you're apologizing for, it's meaningless. Part of actively engaging with a call-out is actually learning from your mistake.
How does one learn if the person that is offended or has taken offense is not offering any guidance as to what they did wrong? At best, all someone can do is then start to feel incredibly guilty about something they know nothing about, or do what I would do when someone tells me that I've offended them and go back to the damn bar and continue drinking as if the retard never existed.
This is why being able to share what you've learned is important. It's not only a great way to validate and appreciate the folks who have called you out, but it can also teach others who don't get it.
Ah, so show and tell, the apology edition.
So they don't make the same mistake. Hint, it's also never too late to use this response. Even if your initial reply wasn't ideal, you can always come back around and share what you've figured out. What I'm gathering is that I not only perpetuated an anti-black stereotype, you might say, but my defensiveness only caused further harm. This lets people know that you're not all lip service. You have paid attention to what was said, and now you're doing the work to make it right. This pairs nicely with a sincere apology, an acknowledgement of the labor that folks did on your behalf, and a commitment to doing better. If you haven't already noticed, mixing and matching the suggestions on this list only strengthens your response.
Do you remember in school when the teacher told you to show your working out? This is basically that. And just to add to it, if you can't think of a sincere apology or what you did wrong to then deserve a sincere apology to someone who took offence, might I recommend acting classes. Some of the world's very best gay pirates do fantastic apologies.
Number 7. Do you have resources you'd recommend?
Now, as you earlier indicated, the person that took offence requires a sincere apology and is no way obligated to offer any assistance whatsoever. This should be interesting.
This is a response that should be used very carefully. You never want to imply that the folks who are calling you out are required to give you an extensive education or invest even more labor on your behalf.
This sounds like another annoying way to keep white people in check by implying that they are entitled or acting entitled to help from people who have taken offence when the person who has offended them doesn't know what they did.
That isn't an appropriate response. That's entitlement.
It's really not.
At the end of the day, you aren't owed anything, and it's your responsibility to try to educate yourself to the best of your ability.
It is so remarkably tempting to talk about how some people will indicate that society owes them everything, or should give everything to everyone, and then flip it when they choose to by saying that society owes you nothing. Personally, if someone takes offence and I can be bothered to find out what I did wrong, and they indicate that there are resources but won't help any further, I'm not going to go to any extra lengths to try and work it out. It would be far simpler for me to just move on. Let that person dwell in their butthurt and their inability to assist in someone else's potential learning because they got upset.
That's why posing this question should be an invitation, not an expectation. I appreciate everyone's thoughtful responses, you could say. I'm doing some research now, but if anyone has a favorite resource on this topic that they'd like to share, I'm totally open to it. Invite people to elaborate the dialogue and engage more deeply with you. More often than not, when invited, folks will appreciate this, but never expect people to do the work on your behalf.
I believe this module can be summed up as follows. If you've offended somebody, and they tell you to go learn about it so you can understand why you're going to apologize to them, do it all yourself, don't expect help. Even if you ask for it, you're not entitled to it. Or to put it another way, find new friends.
Number 8. Thank you. You should never respond to a call-out without thanking the folks who took the time to educate you.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Well, of course.
If you aren't sure why, reread response number 3. No one was required to correct you or engage with you, but their belief that you could do better led them to invest in you, and that investment matters.
Implying that the majority of call-outs are based on wanting to help someone else learn, and not simply to make them look stupid.
Thank you says, you didn't have to, but I appreciate that you did. Thank you says, I don't take you or your labor for granted. Thank you says, it doesn't matter. Number 9. I believe you. Oftentimes when marginalized people in particular call out their allies, a big part of that labor is being vulnerable enough to share how an issue personally affects them. But because of the oppressive systems we live under, marginalized people are often met with disbelief when they're courageous enough to share their experiences.
Doesn't it seem weird to me that it's assumed that people of color's experiences are being ignored? No evidence is being provided. To confirm it, it is asserted. And what I've noticed from the lovely intersectional feminism and the oppression Olympics is that other people's experiences or lived experiences are being measured up, valued, and then determined as who is more or less oppressed, which is not a fair system at all if you're basing it on skin color.
When you respond to a call-out by rejecting those experiences, you're effectively re-traumatizing the community you've already harmed.
When you harm or offend one person, you do not harm or offend a community. You harm or offend an individual. No one person represents an entire community. You, a feminist, should know this better than anyone, since that excuse is used to move goalposts all the time when it comes to accountability.
Don't be that person. Don't deny their experiences. Don't gaslight or presume to know their lives or their pain better than they do. Say, I know this is painful for you to share, and I want you to know that I believe you. And mean it. Believe them. Acknowledge the work that you have put in. Take the time to educate yourself. Express gratitude for their labor. Apologize and make a commitment to them. Take concrete actions to address the harm. Do your homework, share what you've learned, and lead by example. No matter what your gut reaction is and how fragile you might feel, it's your ethical obligation to model the values you claim to hold.
No, that's okay. That requires a lot of effort. Instead, if someone takes offence at what I say and they tell me this, I'll just do what Bearing does and invite them on a live stream, and they can tell me. That doesn't mean I'm entitled. It means they can then damn well explain themselves, and I can defend myself, and we can probably reach common ground. Or I pwn the living fuck out of them because they're wrong. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, but Omegon's a cunt.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Omegon's a cunt. Laura Bones, 2017.
If any of you are feeling incredibly bored and have gotten this far to hear this, I'm going to leave a link to Laura Bones' channel down below in the description. Go subscribe, she's pretty funny, and spam the comments of her channel with "Make Omegon a sandwich."